All set there?
Yes, we are set to go.
Excuse me, I'm going to sit down. My legs have only a few miles left. So I think they'll be able to see me there. Thank you, Ruth. I hope you're feeling better. Welcome, everyone. I was going to give you an update on the Iowa women's basketball game, but I guess it's all over with and we won big. So I feel a little bit like I'm preaching to the choir today. You folks are the heart and soul of family history and history record keeping in general. And I feel it's important to sustain our heritage and getting a glimpse, really, of why we are who we are. As Ruth mentioned, my wife and Helen and I were raised on a farm in Jackson County on the eastern coast of Iowa, and she became a nurse and I became a writer. I worked at the Gazette for 34 years and I retired in 1999, and I'm not much of a golfer, so I decided to continue to write. And so it is fun. And about a year ago, Helen, like so many people have done, had her ancestry researched by one of the many companies that provide that service. I think it was 23andMe that did her background. Turns out, and she proudly points this out, that she's 96.2% Irish. 0.2%. And she says, why aren't you doing this? And are you afraid that they might find out something other than German in you? And she asks, and I respond that I'm comfortable knowing that I'm 120% German. And so I wrote a story about my two grandfathers, both who are German, but very much different. We're different people. They're of course both deceased now, but my mom's dad, that side of that German side came from Baden-Baden, which is down south, and my grandpa Kueter came from up north around Hanover, which is more of the rigid, disciplinary kind of German. And so they're very, very different people. My grandpa Kueter, loving person, but seldom could you see him smile. I don't know why it was. And he had to be first at everything. First to have his hogs to the market, first to have his oats thrashed. He was in charge. Where Grandpa Yeager, my mom's dad, and this is why our family is so interesting, because there are so many differences. But my mom's dad, well, if we don't get it done today, we'll get it done tomorrow. And he didn't go back to, if the hay loader missed a little bunch of hay, well, that's fine, let the deer have it. He was a very laid back person. So there's an example of two Germans, but very different people. I believe names, dates, places are essential, and that's the basis of genealogy and this It must be there. But I believe we have to go beyond that and record all the stories out on the ends of the branches of our family trees. That's where the really good picking is. Stories, and I've spent a lifetime writing stories, but stories are the grist of life. When we die, which we all will, all of our stories will die with us. That's why it's so important, if your parents are still living, or even your grandparents, some of your grandparents, interview them, talk, let them talk, turn on the recorder, take notes, however you can, preserve their stories, ask them questions. I remember in a backyard get-together many years ago, our two youngest daughters were interviewing my father, and I had the tape recording going, and they asked a whole bunch of questions that I never thought about. Grandpa, when did you first kiss a girl? Well, he was a little shy at first to start that discussion off, but once he got going, he told about how the whole process of dating back in his time, and how he, in going to a dance, house dance, I guess they called them, going to a house dance, he tried to jump a creek, but he didn't quite get over it. And so they picked up on that and asked him stories about his life that I wouldn't have thought about. Someone said, and I think quite accurately, that every time someone dies, a library closes. And so I urge you, I implore you, to save your family history. Go beyond the names, dates, and places. Write about those, anything. Your teachers, your family, of course, your parents and your grandparents, and other relatives perhaps, and your teachers. All the cars that you've owned in your life. Think about it. How many cars have you owned? And which ones did you really like, and which ones were really lemons? So there are so many things that you can write about. I wrote a story in The Smell of the Soil about, I went to a country school, and the teacher was Miss Helen Ernst, and she had to leave, and because she needed additional education, she went to Iowa State Teachers College in Cedar Falls to get additional whatever points that she needed, or credits. And so we needed a substitute teacher, and who came out to our rural school but Mrs. Harriet Cuppus from town. Well, that was strike one against her. Here we got a bunch of rural kids and a town person. Her husband was a lawyer, strike two. She drove a green Mercury in a valley filled with Fords and Chevys, strike three. So we were not very nice to her. We would pull tricks, and I'm ashamed to this day of some of the things that we did. Snakes, and brought snakes in the classroom and so forth, well, the classroom. And, but she taught one semester, I think, or maybe a little longer than that, and as usually happened in the springtime, we had a field day, which meant we can get the heck out of the building and don't have to study, and we can have fun trampling around in the timber or whatever she's going to take us. And so she took us up into a growing alfalfa field. You know, it was about that high in springtime, just developing really. And she got up there and she said, now students, I want you, while we're up here, to look for my husband's class ring, the ring he received when he graduated from law school. He lost it last fall while he was hunting pheasants up here. And of course, all the boys nickered and schmoyers. What you're talking about, you know, you're a needle in a haystack kind of thing. And I'll be darned, we were shocked. One of the girls in the school didn't see something sparkling, leaned up and picked up her husband's class ring. Wow, that kind of changed the whole relationship between teacher and particularly the boy students. She must have connections we don't know about. And so I think we treated her the rest of the year much better. And years later, on a Sunday afternoon before we came back from Bellevue, I went over to her house and she was still living it. And I said, Harriet, I just want to apologize for all of how nasty we treated you. I said, it was not called for. She said, oh, don't worry about it. She said, you weren't that bad. You were just like other kids growing up. So, I wanted to read you a story, another one of my stories. I think you should, like I say, write about all people. And there was a columnist in the Gazette not too long ago that wrote a column. He's also from Jackson County, Kurt Ulrich, and I think he lives on a farm up near north of Macoka there someplace. And he wrote a story that was not a lot of uncomfortable details about his family and his growing up. And the title of his column was, Tell Your Ancestor's Story, Even If It's Uncomfortable. And I remember giving this talk on the smell of the soil down at a church off Mount Vernon Road. I can't remember the name of the church, but 38th Street or someplace down there. And there was a woman there, I want to say about 35 years old, who said, and she was obviously handicapped. And she said, well, I don't think I want to write about it because you could see the pain in her face even then. She said, my father always thought that I was not like everybody else and I was something less than a human being. And I thought, my goodness, I said, write about your story. Write about your feelings. I'm a 2-time cancer survivor, and I gave talks to other cancer patients. Write about how you feel. I think it can be therapy. If you get it out of your system. If you're angry, write about that. If you're on the road to recovery, write about that. Well, I led off my book, The Smell of the Soil, with a chapter called The Queen of Clutter. It's not a sad story, it's not happy story. It's just a story of an aunt who's kind of on the loony side. I had a great aunt, now deceased, who was none too great about housekeeping. Let's just say she was about as keen on neatness as rap musicians are devoted to verbal decorum. She was a cheerful sort, but her jolly character was overwhelmed by the disarray that she allowed to accumulate around her. I think she invented clutter. Children, especially boys, are not famous for noticing clutter. Frequently, they are too immersed in it to recognize it. But this aunt promoted clutter to the point that everyone noticed. The disorder of her house, mostly clothes draped everywhere, would make the Goodwill store look like Saks Fifth Avenue. Compared to her, stereotypically messy teenagers would win the good housekeeping award. I can't say that her place was filthy, but the general chaos would have embarrassed any self-respecting hobo. It caused my cousins and me to wonder if there was more to her perennial orange jello than grapes and sliced bananas. We would visit her once a year, often enough, my father pronounced. It was a significant road trip from our eastern Iowa farmstead, 3 miles north of the town of Bellevue. The trip across the Mississippi River at Savannah, Illinois was one of the highlights. She lived on a hill in Savannah. The amazing thing about the aunt is that she never put away things that she'd laundered. Towels, bed linens, underwear, overalls, all over the chairs and tables of her house. Her living room looked like the January white sale at Penny's. And looking back, she had to be on the plus side of dippy. It was not unusual during the bitter world cold of winter for my mother, to hang clothes to dry on a line inside the house. Snowdrifts frequently made the backyard clothesline inaccessible. When she'd hang them outside to winter, they freeze dried. Numb fingers plucked clothespins, and you stacked overalls and shirts in your arms like cordwood. Wherever the clothes dried, whenever the clothes dried, they were folded and sent to the proper drawer. To be sure, no dripping garments or folded ones greeted visitors at our house. So Mom was completely flabbergasted by her aunt's laundry exhibit. No one, as far as I know, ever said a word about this mess to my great aunt, and hence every year would be the same. And we always seemed to visit her and her husband once during the summer, and that was a summer trip. Every year we were greeted by vast quantities of folded laundry, displayed as to render every piece of furniture useless for what it was intended. She was a medium-sized woman with salt and pepper hair hoisted in a bun. She talked a lot, but never once about her littering laundry. I remember her because of that laundry, I suppose. But I don't recall anything about her husband, my great uncle. If he had any sense of order, he must have been on the verge of insanity. It seemed our summer visits always coincided with favorable weather, allowing drinking and eating to occur outside. This was most fortunate. there was never a place for food on my great aunt's dining table. Towels and underwear preempted space for mashed potatoes, garden peas, and pie. I think my dad prayed for a sunny day when we went to my great aunt's house. Before one such trip, I heard him telling my mom, "I sure hope it's a nice day so we can sit outside." There are so many stories like that of people in our lives. Happy stories, sad stories, neutral stories, just stories. I love stories. That brings me to Grandpa Pete, Helen's grandfather. We don't know where he died. We don't know where he's buried. He was a gambler, and his wife's brothers in the early 1900s, early 20s, said, "We will pay off the gambling debts that you have on your farm if you will leave town, leave the farm, leave the farm." And so apparently he took up on that request, and we think he went to Washington to work in the forestry business. We don't know. We know that there was one letter he sent to his brother Nick near Wichita, Kansas. But other than that, I'm depending on the Genealogy Society here to help me. We don't know anything about Pete. So I plead with you, go beyond the basics, write your stories. Indeed, the world is a stage, and we're part of it. What a great thing to pass on to your children and grandchildren and others in your family. Have fun with it. You can tape record it, you can write it down, get your grandchildren to put it on a computer or whatever scheme you use, but be sure you preserve your stories. I think you'll find, once you get started, it's like eating popcorn. So I would entertain any questions that you might have about, I should tell you one other story about the smell of the soil. It's a book about my stories, in addition to my great aunt and my grandfather's. There's a whole lot of stories as examples for you, and chapters that kind of nudge you along, give you suggestions on how to go about it and so forth. This picture is a picture of I love it. It's a picture of a farm east of Anamosa. I took a book up to the guy, but the reason I liked it was because how the road winds through the freshly plowed soil. I wanted to get such a picture of my own farm in north of Bellevue, but unfortunately, every time I went over there in the springtime, the guy it was not plowed. It was stubble corn or wheat or whatever he was, soybeans. It was never, it didn't look nice at all. So it didn't contrast like this one did. So that's how this came about. We were going to Bellevue one day and my daughter said, "Dad, there is the picture just like you wanted." And so I stopped and snapped it, and it became the story of the book. But with that, I'll invite your questions or comments.
Dale, I'm going to make a comment. My uncle, I think, worked with you, and I'd love to hear a story because, of course, he's been gone a long time. It was Bill Crabtree, and he worked at the Gazette.
Yeah, I remember the name.
They called him Krabby,
Yeah,
because he probably was.
well, I don't remember
Oh,
that.
oh darn, I was hoping I'd get a point or two on that.
No, he worked in the back room, did he?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, he actually worked with Paulson Electric and was assigned to the Gazette.
Okay. Yeah, I remember the name, but, the back room, the back shop, as we called it then, and the newsroom, obviously, most of your friends were in the newsroom. And I'm sure most of their friends were in the back shop. I have to tell you what, I'm so old that when I went to the University of Iowa, we had to take a class on how to set type. We had to learn how to run the topography and the set headlines and the old lead headlines. And the instructor of that was a man by the name of Mr. Africa. I can't remember his first name, but he was a huge man, and he was always grumpy. And I think he didn't like news people very well, because we always asked, exceptional things of the back shop. Like when we had our first failure, Vanguard, I think it was, attempt at space. It failed on the launch pad, and so we set up a Vanguard and went down the right-hand column like it was failing. And this caused extra work for them over in the back shop, and they weren't too crazy about that. And but it was fun, and so they were always very helpful, though. I can remember coming back with a story. Back in the day, we had 3 editions. The first deadline was at 12:30 for the rural editions, then probably Springville and Anamosa. Then we had what was called the city final at 2:30 deadline. And then we had the predate, or the one that went out in the mail, which was at 12:30 a.m. So things have changed a lot by then. The Gazette was an evening paper, as many papers were then. And so, but I came back with a story out of City Hall about, 2:15. Jack Illian, the old crusty city editor, said, "You get that thing typed up, I'll take care of the back shop." So I got it ready in 10 minutes and handed it to him in the back shop. We got the story in the paper through their efforts back at the shop. So.
If any of you on Zoom have any questions or comments for Dale, please unmute your mic and.
So
Yes, sir.
I have a question about your book.
Yeah.
Is there a particular significance to the title of the soil?
Yes, there is. It's not a book on farming. A lot of people think, growing up on a farm. When I was a teenager on the farm, Dad asked me to plow a certain field. And so, I was delighted to get on the tractor and plow. It was an alfalfa field, and we had an H Farmall, which is not a big tractor. And so I didn't tell my dad, but I put a straight pipe on it before I went out to the field, because that really made it bark when it got into that and I'm plowing along there, and the old Farmall is struggling to upturn the alfalfa roots, when all of a sudden I stop. To this day, I don't know what caused me to do that. I just stopped. I got off the tractor, went behind the plow, dug my hands into the black soil, smelled it. This is a teenager. smelled it. And I said to my gosh, now I know why my dad is so active in conservation. Now I know why the Indians respect the soil like they do. It's like a mother's womb. We live because of the soil. And I had this whole epiphany, if you will, and I never told my parents about it. Certainly didn't talk to my teenage friends about such an ordeal. But from that came the smell of the soil. And there's a story about that in
Well, I've certainly been inspired. I've got stories going around in my head of thinking of other people in my family, because you're right, we kind of concentrate on our pedigree line and don't get out on the branches, but that's an excellent.
Yeah, there's really an unlimited, I think, of stories yet, you know. One of the things I did is kept a little yellow stickum pad on next to my bed. And oftentimes couldn't get to sleep, and I'd think, there's a story. So I'd write down the gist of it so I wouldn't forget it the next morning. And I'd have myself another story. Then, develop it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying there isn't some hyperbole in my stories.
A little embellishment.
A little embellishment.
That's okay.
Helen is referring to a story I wrote about her. She always liked, or we thought she liked, a certain kind of cologne, was it? Cologne, lemony cologne. And so when her lemony cologne would run out, one of our daughters or myself would replenish it, on her birthday, at Christmas, and anniversary, and all during the year. And we didn't find out till a number of years later that she hated this stuff. Well, what did you do with it? She said, I dumped it in the humidifier.
Oh, remember Jean Natte?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's really
Yes.
good. I don't know why they thought I liked it. It's probably the first time they gave it to me, I said, thank you, There wasn't as many times as he embellished that.
But Helen never had the, mothers, they would never say, well, I really hate this stuff. They wouldn't do that. Yes.
I'm thinking of writing stories, but I'm not a flowery person, and so I can say, I did this, I did this, but I can't make a story.
Oh,
I should
we
tell her
surprised.
what I'm doing, because I've never done that story either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not always connected, but I'm not gonna write it. I didn't think I was. But for Christmas, he gave me this idea, it's called Storybook. Have you heard of it? Every week they send you a question. And just a lot of different, or they'll send you a whole bunch at once and you can choose, or you can choose
Is
your
it
own.
an app?
And so it's online, and they don't send it in online. But I've written 20 stories so far.
At the end
The
of it,
idea is that you get 52.
Mm-hmm. And then they publish it for you.
Yeah,
Right.
they publish it for you.
Mhm.
And so it's been fun. At
Yeah.
first it was homework.
What's it called?
Story work. And it's like $95 or something to do.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
less than $100,
Yeah.
and
So, I'm getting it done. And yeah, it does give you ideas, and then you come up with ideas on your own. And so you can send in different things, So I've gotten some of that before.
yeah, you don't have to adhere to their
You
format.
don't have to do it every week, you can do it 4 of them.
My husband's brother's children and grandchildren gave it to them
Yeah.
for Christmas. And so they're telling their stories so that they can pass it on.
But you'd be surprised, you say you're not very flowery. Think of your mom and dad, and what were their idiosyncrasies? Did he tug at his ear, or did she, who was the disciplinarian? So there's a lot of different things that you can recall about them, unusual things, different things that made them different.
But when he was talking about grandpa too, it was before social security.
Oh, you have no records,
No
no.
records. And he and grandma had 8 children. The youngest one was about 10. My mother was one of the leaders.
And you might have escaped the census too.
Yeah,
You know, not,
nothing in the 40
because not
census.
every person was counted, I mean,
No.
you couldn't get.
Can't find anything.
And don't forget, if you've got a cell phone, you've got an app that says notes. You know, you can make notes for yourself, you can turn on a recording, not notes, what am I talking about? It's the other one. Notes is where you write your own things, but voice memos, that's it. Voice memos that you can record, interviewing somebody or having them tell you something, you can hit the voice memos. That's a handy thing, you don't have a tape recorder.
But even if you don't feel that you can put together a complete, well-rounded story, you can still record information that others would be thrilled to know about.
Oh, absolutely. You're absolutely right. I'm sure that I both not only embellished some of my stories, but left things out. So, but if you get the gist of a dad or mom or grandfather or grandmother, I think that's the important part. And you paint a picture for your children and grandchildren.
Josh, would you care to share your little thing you got? Rocket. It's quite interesting.
It is cool.
It's a fun thing. It's a old rocket book that I can take notes on here and then spell you scan page. And then it's fun with that one. So if you're more of a handwriting type person, you can do that and then drop it on your phone. So it's there.
And they run around
$35, $40.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They make nice gifts.
Okay.
It was a work gift, so I don't know. Yeah, for work.
So
Great.
story worth.
Anybody else working on their stories here? Oh, great, good.
I have to just an observation. One of the things that was important in my mother's side of the family was cooking. They were Czech and Bohemian, and my grandmother, I think, might have finished 8th grade, spoke some English. One thing I completely overlooked, you know, we get so focused on birth, death, marriage records, her cookbooks. Oh, I found one the other day, wonderful chicken dumpling recipe. Right next to it, chicken scours. Apparently, they're not related, right? The scours were probably a get well for the chickens recipe.
Yeah, I would think so.
But I continue, every page had handwritten notes on it. Completely forgot about the importance of those cookbooks.
Yeah.
So it's amazing what, like you said, what inspires you.
If you were the firstborn in a family and your mother had a baby book on you, the book is full. It is full, day by day, month by month, year by year. My younger sister, nothing.
Yeah.
But I was looking at my baby book yesterday and I was amazed. In one of the things, September 18th, moved to Cedar Rapids. So I now know the exact day. I know the year already, but I know the exact day they moved to Cedar Rapids. I didn't expect to find that in my baby.
These are questions you have on Storybook. What are, how old you live in, what age, you know, and sort of what years the children are.
And your pets, you know, when
What
you're
pets,
growing
yeah,
up,
did you
I
have
mean, I
right,
remember
growing
every
up
pet
with
we ever
right,
had.
They have all kinds of questions.
Yeah.
I think that helps with this story where there's a lot of folks, because they don't know where to begin. And getting the questions like that, you know, there's no, just start out little vignettes of a story about your great aunt, a story about your grandfather, a story about, you know, just, you know, picking the little chunks to write about, so like, where do I begin? How do I start this thing? Start the bite-sized chunks, start the little pieces, the little questions, I think that helps.
They don't need to be in chronological order, people should be in a little title, or just a paragraph or two, and they might learn something different. Makes it more interesting than just, you know, I was born in my blah, blah, blah.
Well, I have to say, Ruth, I don't think my mom or dad ever kept a baby book on me. Back in those days,
Yeah.
back in the late 30s and early 40s.
I don't know, I have my mom's, and she was born in 29. Not a lot's in it, but at least it's.
When did you get your first TV?
Oh,
And what happened that day?
That's another question.
Or indoor plumbing even. for
Indoor
some of us.
plumbing, yeah.
For some of
Right.
us.
Absolutely.
And the other day, I don't know what brought, well, there was I think you were working a crossword puzzle, and you asked me about a divining rod.
Oh, yeah.
And my dad used to use those all the time. We had a water pipe that ran from the wash house down to the hog house, and almost every year, particularly in extremely cold weather, it would freeze up. So he would use two number 9mm wires that he'd fashioned up, and he'd go along to try to find this pipe, and when they turned, that's where we dug and thawed out the pipe. And memories like that, goofy stuff. I was cleaning out a circular corn crib. It was down to the nubbins. And I was throwing out the last ears of corn. And guess what else was in there? Mice.
Oh.
And two of them ran up each of my pant legs. So simultaneous to my jig and other things, I was shucking my pants. My mother came along, and I've never heard her laugh so loudly. She laughed and laughed. You know, mothers are supposed to take sympathy with you. They're not supposed to laugh at you. But I got rid of those mice. I didn't care whether she saw underwear or not. There's all kinds of things that, remembrances that make good story for you. So, like I say, whenever a thought comes to you, write it down, because you won't remember it tomorrow morning after you have a full night's sleep. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Dale. That was wonderful.
Are you selling your book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a few books here for
And how
sale.
much?
20.
$20. Okay, books are for sale for $20. Well, we'll say goodbye to you, Zoom people. Thank you for joining us. You can come in person sometime.
I did bring along a couple of copies of a book called Motel Sepia. I don't know if any of you,
Yeah, you spoke on it here a couple
Did I?
years ago. Yes, you
Yeah.
did.
okay.